correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience. Hey folks, welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs, and this week, because one Steve is camping, there's only one Steve on the podcast, but never fear. I have recruited someone who you've heard before and who's, well, frankly become a friend of the show, and just a great person to game with, and that would be Daryl from How We Roll. So, hello, Daryl.
Hello, Steve. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, welcome back. And in the grand spirit of Me and Steve, and having guests on from other podcasts on the D20 Radio Network, Daryl is going to tell you about another great show on the D20 Radio Network that you can listen to.
It's an amazing show, Steve, if I do say so myself. But as 1/3 of the How We Roll Gaming podcast, along with my co-hosts Nick and Robert, we do kind of the same thing that you and Steve do. We just, chat about different concepts in role-playing games and try to maybe offer some tips that might help people improve or issues that they might encounter. We try to come up with a theme and a topic every episode, and as often as not, about halfway through, we end up just telling fun stories about what we've encountered around our tables. But we drop episodes bi-weekly. Our latest one dropped this week as you and I record. And it was, what was it on? I mean, I only recorded it the other night.
Well, but to pull back the curtain a little bit, there's also that weird time lapse in podcasting where what is now isn't necessarily now then, and maybe it was then and isn't. There's the whole time dilation thing.
Yeah, but maybe a glimpse into the future, maybe a glimpse into the past. Our next one, you've heard it here first, everyone. The title of our next episode is called Honey, Where Are My Pants? And it's about running a game with little or no prep and just flying by the seat of your pants.
Having played with you and Nick and Robert and a good portion of your crew, I can say that's a lot of fun with your crew.
Yes, yes, it is. But yeah, we drop every other week, and I'm also going to sneak in a plug for our sister podcast that drops on the alternate weeks. It's not on D20 Radio because it's not gaming related, but it's Casual Nerdity, and it's more of a pop culture podcast. And the bulk of our episodes are a sub-series that we call Clone Watch, where one member of our group is watching Clone Wars for the first time. And so we're going through and analyzing that. But we've also done episodes on Thunderbolts and Superman and Fantastic Four and the passing of the late, great comics writer Peter David, and have some other non-Clone Wars stuff coming up in the pipe.
Clone Wars is such a great series, though. It really is.
Oh, yeah. And it's fun watching it with someone who's never watched it before. And in fact, has not watched much Star Wars before. And so getting their perspective as more or less an outsider, and they're catching things that we were frankly surprised that we have missed in many years of watching the show.
Well, and look, we'll just tangent here because we can. I think the thing that struck me is with Clone Wars specifically, and this is not in any way to spoil anything for anybody, but just how much more it showed Anakin's turn and made it make sense.
Oh, absolutely. And so I know that you've listened to the Movie Defenders podcast. You've had Brev on the show. Mm-hmm. Scott, one of the other hosts of Movie Defenders, was talking about how when his son first started watching Star Wars, they watched it in episode order, but they watched Clone Wars in between 2 and 3. And he said, for my son, he was right in the pocket, he was in that sweet spot that it was worth sacrificing the Empire Strikes Back Vader reveal, because over the course of Clone Wars, Anakin became Sean's hero. And seeing the turn in Revenge of the Sith crushed him far more than the Vader reveal in Empire could have. He was more invested in it, and it affected him more than that reveal would have if he'd watched in release order.
Yeah, and like, see, to me, the turn in Revenge of the Sith, if all you've ever seen is Revenge of the Sith, just feels hokey and quick and I don't want to say forced, but it doesn't feel as organic as if you've watched Clone Wars. You see, and okay, yes, I'm watching it from a perspective of knowing that's what's going to happen, but you can see all the foreshadowing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we have a running gag on our Clone Watch episodes where usually once an episode, one of us trots out the phrase, foreshadowing is a literary device and sometimes can be subtle. To the point that I keep saying we need to just record that so I can just drop it rather than us having to say it.
Right? Just have like a little like you see all those people use the SpongeBob cuts in YouTube videos and stuff.
Yes.
Well, all that being said, so yeah, go check out How We Roll, Casual Nerdity, etc. Great people, great fun. But what I kind of wanted to talk about this week, I think, is, and I don't know exactly where this came to mind, but kind of the thought of, as gamers, what do game designers owe us, or to say it maybe slightly differently, what is it fair for us to expect of game designers when we go to buy a game? And I'm not saying this to like call anyone out, just to kind of like, hey, are more to maybe say, are we being realistic and fair to the designers, when we pick up a game in the store? And so, like, I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but I've seen a fair amount of discourse around that in the past month or so since Daggerheart came out.
Mhm.
So since there is a new big player in the space, the conversation is coming up, what do you expect from a game? What does the game quote unquote owe you? I've been seeing that a lot more, and it's not in a snarky, grognard way, but people clearly have expectations when they pick up an RPG.
Yeah, maybe the better way to say it is what are reasonable expectations to have of a game. And I I don't have the energy to heavily follow a lot of the social media stuff that goes on between my work schedule and everything else. I just don't have time to scroll and find all that. And I refuse to become active on Reddit because the way my brain works, I will never freaking leave if I start getting into Reddit.
Especially since they gamify it. You're on a streak.
But yeah, like I've seen comments about, this thing, that thing, community content programs, and like I don't know. Like, don't get me wrong, I love community content programs. I think they are a wonderful thing. I have been very critical of Wizards and the fiasco that surrounded the OGL and maybe them trying to revoke it and whatever. And I'm not trying to backtrack on that, but I don't think, and this is again my take on it. I don't think that a game company owes it to their fans to have an official community content program. I think it's a great marketing idea,
Oh,
but I
for
don't
sure.
think it's in any way owed. And so, like, and and the other thing is then, right? Look, as a creative, you're going to have things that you want to stay yours. And intellectual property law is so complex and so muddy that I think in some cases it's just a matter of, look, we just don't want to deal with it.
Right. Right. And so my top level answer of what a game developer quote unquote owes us is one of those high level non-answers. They owe us a game that lets us have fun.
Fair. That's a good answer, actually.
And there are many ways that can be gone about, and what answers that question can differ from person to person. So my take on it is, give me something that is easy to learn and easy to play, not too super crunchy. Looking at you, D&D. And the next thing I was going to say just completely flew out of my brain as I was opening my mouth.
You were saying not super crunchy, but
not super crunchy, but also you give me some flexibility to do stuff. Don't have it super locked in and rigid, and just make it fun. I mean, there's plenty of games that I have picked up that I'm like, on paper, it's like, this looks like an amazing fun game, and I start playing it and I was like, no, this is not.
Yeah.
I told this story online just this week. I don't even remember how it came up, but in the 90s, like, say, Last Unicorn Games had the Star Trek license.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine was super gung-ho. He wanted to run it. And I was like, hey, that sounds great to me. He got a group together. We all got together. One of the things that the game recommended was to avoid an imbalance among the group, to avoid a power trip, for want of a better term. The captain should be an NPC. Now, never mind that if you're playing Starfleet, you already have a ranked hierarchy command structure in place, even if one of the PCs isn't the captain. So you still have that potential for the power plays. And it ended up being a few hours of us role-playing, pushing the buttons, and executing the commands that the GM told us to, for the most part. And it wasn't fun, and it lasted one session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think, to me, the thing that I feel like a designer owes us is a playable game.
Yeah.
I feel like what you're describing was not a fun experience for you and your table. To me, it does not sound like a terribly fun experience if that is the meat of the game. However, I'm sure there are people who could think that was great fun.
Yeah.
So, to me, that's kind of a gray area. There's a game I have a PDF of, and it's something we found a long time ago on Game of the Week. And the concept seemed really, really, really interesting. So I bought it. I downloaded it, and I started reading through it. And what I realized is this particular game, I believe in the drive-through description, basically said that they had attempted to kickstart it, and the campaign hadn't been successful, and so on. So this was the manuscript that they had. Well, what I realized was that what we had in the PDF that I got for this game, and I'm not 100% sure what the title is. I'm not going to dig through the huge folder of PDFs on my hard drive and find it and make sure. So I'm not going to give the name of the game out because I don't want to, like, call them out particularly, right? But reading this, what I realized I had was the GM's notebook from a really cool homebrew system/campaign, and that everything that was there seemed quite good and pretty thought out, but it was missing pieces. Like, try as I might, I could not find a difficulty chart for checks. Well, it's telling me the mechanics on how to make the checks, but there's no difficulty chart.
How am I supposed to know when we do it or not?
But you and I both, like, if that's the type of mistake I could see me making if I was writing out notes for something, because in my head I know what the difficulty is, but I never formally wrote it down. And to me, that's the type of thing that I expect to get in the book. It's one thing, and look, you've played Havoc Brigade with me. At some point during that session, the few rules that there are for that game just go out the window, and it's
exactly
how
and
spectacularly do you do the thing, right? But the fact that I choose to abandon the rules is different than them not being there for me to abandon.
Right. Right. It's the same concept as a comics fan. Whenever people are talking about certain comics artists, I won't name any names. Liefeld. Oh, I'm sorry. Had something caught in my throat there. Um, you have to know the rules of anatomy and perspective before you can effectively break them.
Well, so
And the
that's
same kind of concept. You have to know what the game is before you can toss the rules out the window.
well, just to go on to what you're saying there, though, a reference that maybe a lot of our audience will get is the layout in Morkborg and the associated games. I believe the guy who did the layout from Stockholm Cartel's name is Johan. He is a professional trained graphic designer. He intentionally broke all the rules when he was laying out Morkborg. But I think, and I know people who find the game almost impossible to read because of the layout choices. But I feel like, and for me specifically, Cyborg, where they did very similar things, that kind of chaotic layout adds a lot to the vibe of the game. But in a sense, because he knew what he was supposed to do, he could break the rules to increase the effect he was going for.
Right. Absolutely. And you've actually, without even trying to, kind of touched on something else that I was thinking of about something that I think a developer owes us. And this is from a more practical standpoint, a readable book.
Yes.
A usable, readable book. I don't want to call out any developers or any systems that might cover uh, teens with attitude, real American heroes more than meets the eye, friendship is magic. Those books are awful. The system is great. The books are awful.
Well, as someone with a stack of old school Palladium titles a foot and a half high behind me, I I I I feel like in the modern day and age, we are also owed a usable layout, which I think
Yes.
is kind of what you're getting at. You know, and look, Palladium, and I bitch and grumble about them a lot. I think Palladium was really at the time, right? In the late 80s, early 90s there when Palladium came to be, desktop publishing was in its infancy, and I think Kevin was doing a lot of things that were, I don't want to say pushing the envelope of what the technology was capable of at the time, but he was using what he had pretty hard. I think that's fair to
Yeah.
say. So for the era in when they started, I can sort of say it's forgivable. But it,
Today, much less so.
yes,
Uh,
yes,
for instance, the system that I am vaguely alluding to with oh so clever illusions, uh, for cross-compatible systems where character creation is not laid out the same way in each of them,
yeah,
where a particular character creation element from system A's book is easier to find in system B's book.
yeah. I see. I feel like that's a thing that we deserve to not have to deal with in the modern publishing, and to a
Yes.
certain point, like I think because of the, and look, I don't have the skills in layout and editing and all that stuff that a lot of people do. So I don't know how much work it is, but I know it's a whole lot easier now than it used to be.
Very much. Very much. I mean, I'm sitting here in Microsoft Word making homebrew Star Wars stuff that I have to dial myself back a little bit and say, like, okay, this looks too much like Fantasy Flight / Edge.
Right, but now you have the capability of templating
Yeah.
and all that that wasn't a thing 20, 15, 20 years ago. You know, and that templating and even look, like I'm not saying like I'm sure you've seen it. A Free League book is not laid out in the same order that uh, a a fantasy, an Edge Studios book is laid out in, that a our Talsorian book is laid out in.
Right.
There, I know a lot of Europeans, from what I understand, I've never paid close enough attention to actually see this. They tend to put a lot more fluff lore in the beginning of the book and then the mechanics later, where typical American thing has more been to load the mechanical up front and then all the lore and fluff in the back half. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, can you find the thing you're looking for?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And the same vague system, their tables are awful. But I love the games.
Right. And
What
so,
once you get past that, the games are fun.
and like, I think, so, okay, to, and this is in the same, this is an adjacent topic, let's say, but how much system mastery do you think is fair for a game to flow? And by that, what I'm saying is, like, you get some games that are crunchier than others, but if you have a GM that has achieved a certain level of system mastery, or players that have achieved a certain level of system mastery, it's a much smoother game than it would seem from reading the book. And like, I'll point to a certain point, even Genesis and Star Wars are a little this way. Like, for me, reading those books, I'm like, I I still don't entirely get the system from reading the books.
I,
But to play, look,
I can
you
hear
were
you.
one of the victims of my second ever attempt of running the narrative Genesis as a system. And admittedly, I did weird shit because I'm me and that's what I do. But like, it was a thing where, especially with your group, you all know the system. I know the system enough to understand what it wants to do, and we all knew the premise enough to go, we're just
Let's
going
go.
for it. And I felt like, for what I tried to do, it was probably the best pick it up and drop it in this system way I could have done it.
Well, along those lines, yeah, there's definitely something to be said about the point that you're making here, because I can point to an example too, and if Nick, one of my co-hosts, were here, he would say that he had the exact same experience because we've talked about it before.
Hmm.
Um, just based on what we saw about it before ever playing it, both of us bought everything that was out up to that point for Free League's Alien RPG,
Mm.
and sat down, was reading through the core rulebook, and was like, okay, this makes perfect sense. Then went to do a second read through and had no clue what it was trying to say on the second read through. And it kind of became overcomplicated for us on the second read through. And then we sat down at a table and Brev ran it for us and was like, oh, we have this now. And it unlocked the core rulebook for us. And when we looked back at it again, it was like, how did we become confused the second time we read this?
Hmm.
So there's definitely something there to that. And I want to say that others in our group, just flipping through the Alien books, had a similar experience. At first glance, everything seemed to make perfect sense. And then when you actually think about applying it, it didn't. And then once
Hmm.
you saw it in action, oh no, I totally get it.
Hmm. Yeah, and like the other, this kind of thought also for me, a game that I've had this experience with, is Mutants and Masterminds, which I would say is on the crunchier side of a lot of, it's clearly got its. I think it grew out of a D&D 3.5 core starting point.
That's fair.
It's not recognizable. I think, to the average person, you would look at it and go, well, it uses D20s. To me, it seems to have grown from those roots. It is its own thing now. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
Steve Kenson, whoever, just ripped it off, because he didn't. But my only experience playing Mutants and Masterminds has been with Alex Thomas, who is now one of the co-lead devs for the system. Now, at the time, he was, well, it's a weird timeline. At the time when he actually ran it for me the first time, I believe he was a contracted dev for Green Ronin. But when he agreed to do it, he was a freelancer. So there's a weird, but what I'm saying is, this is an individual who very much knows the system, and to sit at a table and play it with him, it flows so smoothly. And I know from myself trying to run games, and this is with players that are largely new to the system. He makes it run amazingly smooth. Not just one, but several. In fact, if you go back and listen to, I think it's called the Modoc Family Reunion actual plays that we have way back in the feed, the only person on that cast that had ever played Mutants and Masterminds before was Alex, GMing it. And he was also teaching us how to use Roll20 to play it while he was teaching us how to play it. So, like, right? So there's a lot of that going on. And I've also actually got to play in person with him at a local convention. And it's when he runs it, it's so smooth. And me not being the biggest like comic book superhero person, it's not a system I would ever consider really running because that's just not my ball of wax.
Sure.
But also, like, boy, I would forever compare me running it to him running it, and I know that's not fair to me.
Yeah, I run into the same kind of thing when I run Star Wars or Genesis, having sat at the tables of Phil and Chris and Darren. It's like, okay, yeah, you guys are so much better than me. But we're talking here about two people who have run a podcast for the game since it dropped.
Yeah, well, Phil technically didn't
And done
officially
deep
join the
dives.
podcast, but yeah, like
Yeah.
they've been deep into Star Wars role playing for a very, very long time.
Yeah. So, that there's definitely kind of a level there. I even at our home games, I occasionally will have imposter syndrome. Like Robert will say both on and off air on our show that my Walking Dead campaign that I'm currently running is his favorite game of the half dozen or so that we're currently playing, and I'm like, okay, whatever you say, okay.
Yeah, well, but I think it's like you said, he's having a good time with it. He's getting what he
Yeah.
wanted, and it comes to also a thing of, and I'm guessing you do a thing I do a lot, Daryl. You think of what you thought it was supposed to be, comparing to what happened. The analogy I give, say all the time, and I've said it on the show a number of times. You've probably heard me say it. You meant to make chocolate lava cake for your players. What they got was a really cool brownie. But they didn't know it was supposed to be this chocolate lava cake. They just got a cool brownie.
I think more in part it's that I peeled back the curtain for him in our last episode when we came up with the flying by the seat of our pants topic for the next episode, that he said that our last Walking Dead session was his favorite one so far. And I was like, yeah, I walked in to the room knowing you guys were going to the festival. That was the setting. Everything else, I was just, picking up what you guys were putting down.
Mm-hmm.
And coming up with a way to twist it and make it interesting.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like and I think that's where it's hard to define, what do you expect from a game, because it's like, because a game is essentially a creative tool. And so, like, to put it in a musical context, I dabble a little bit with guitar, have for years. Well, what do I expect if I go to buy a new guitar? I need a functional instrument. The instrument that I want for what I want to play and how I play may be drastically different than what you would want for what you would want to play and the sounds you would want to make with it, or the sounds that, insert any number of guitarists into that, right? That's why you see so many different guitarists playing wildly different guitars, because of how they're using it. But on some fundamental level, with an electric guitar, you need a something to hold the strings. The strings need to disrupt the magnetic field of the pickups, and it has to translate that disruption of the magnetic field into a signal that the amp make guitar-y noises.
Right.
So in a sense, I think that's what I'm saying, where I feel like the game needs to be a playable structure. But then you get into, like, okay, if and we'll
Are you
just pick
gonna
on Free League, we all expect, if we buy a Free League game, that the art is going to be really cool.
Yes.
But I think that is an established it is a standard Free League has set for themselves. Like if you go buy a car, you have different expectations if you buy a Kia or if you buy a Ferrari.
Right. Yeah, and that's totally and the once you have that guitar, are you playing something very structured like classical guitar music? Or are you doing jazz where you're all over the place
Mm-hmm.
and free forming? And that
Right.
same kind of thing can apply to your game system. A D&D game system is going a D&D like game system is going to be more conducive to your classical guitar. It's much more structured, where you have the more narrative systems let you play jazz.
Yeah. And Mark Borg is a death metal album turned RPG, but that's what they said on the cover. So, you know.
It's like we played a game of our Avatar Legends campaign last weekend. It is so narrative focused that while we did roll dice a few times in this session, I think twice,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 3 times, entire sessions have gone by without us rolling dice at all.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't notice until the session's done, and we've had a ton of fun. And we're like, wait, did we roll dice? We didn't. I don't care. I had fun.
Right. I think that's the thing. The purpose of the game is to facilitate the fun, and different fun is different. Now, okay, let's maybe, I don't know, crank this idea up. What about for a licensed game? Since you brought up, we mentioned Star Wars, you mentioned Avatar. I mean, I have, well, I did you play in any of my Men in Black stuff last year?
Yes.
That was a
Yes.
licensed game. Now, obviously, that's long since dead and gone and no longer officially out there and whatever. Is it, or you mentioned Alien, is it fair for us to have different expectations of a licensed game as opposed to,
I think it's fair because I think it's fair to expect what's advertised on the tin.
mm,
I think it's fair to pick up an Alien game and not have a system that wants to deliver Spaceballs, both of which are incredibly entertaining. Alien and Spaceballs are both entertaining, but you don't go to an Alien movie for Spaceballs.
yeah,
And so from an Alien game, you expect, given that the series itself nearly reinvents itself with each movie with a different subgenre. First one's a haunted house movie, second one's a war movie, third one's a prison movie. The
hmm
fourth one is, I don't know, other than a dry run for the characters from Firefly. But it's each one had its own flavor, but was unmistakably alien because there was the constant of horror with the alien concepts that have run throughout the movies. And
hmm
so you would expect that same kind of thing from the games. And the
hmm
same goes for any licensed IP. You expect it to deliver a toolbox to let you recreate the flavor of the IP that it's based on.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And at the same time, I say that and wonder at times, like, but that also I think makes it even harder because what you take away from an IP and what I take away from an IP could be completely different. And have you ever seen the movie? I know you're a bit of a film nut. The original Lake Placid film with Oliver Platt, Betty White, um,
If
Jackie
I
Gleason's
have, it's
kids.
been many, many years ago.
Okay,
I don't
it's
really remember.
it, it's it's ostensibly a horror film in a way. I think it's absolutely hysterical. Okay, so my takeaway from if I were to try and write an adventure based on that film would probably be vastly different than what you or say Brev might take away from that to write an adventure or Die Hard. Look at its core. Die Hard is a dungeon crawl,
Oh yeah.
but my takeaway versus your takeaway versus Brev's takeaway on Die Hard could be completely different. And so if you're trying to make Die Hard the RPG, you have to try and make that in a way that lets all three of us make our diehard out of it. And that can be incredibly challenging, I would
It
think.
absolutely can. It can. And I think most I will say most because A, I haven't played all of them, and B, not all of them are successful, but most licensed multimedia IPs, game studios have done a pretty decent job of, like, you know, FFG had, yes, I know a lot of people view it as a money grab to divide Star Wars up into three lines. But in doing so, they found the three flavors of Star Wars that are the main hallmarks that most everybody takes away, but allows you to isolate the Empire versus Rebels in Age of Rebellion, the scum and villainy in Edge of the Empire, and the space wizards with laser swords in Force and Destiny. And they can all commingle. So
Yes.
that was especially for launching everything, that was a great move in 2020 hindsight. I didn't come into it until long after those three things were established by it. But going forward, I know that I've heard you and other people talking about it. I've heard Nate from Tabletop Empire talking about it. I've heard any future edition probably needs to meld them all back together into one.
Yeah.
And meld them together into one while still giving you aspects of each of those flavors to mix and match, probably in a more versatile way.
Well, boy, that is a massive can of worms.
Oh,
And
sure.
I think
And
the thing
it's fresh on my mind because Stephanie and I were making characters last night for a new campaign.
well, but Star Wars, I think, especially for a licensed, established multimedia IP, is so much more varied than many of them. Like, yeah, Alien does different things, but Star Wars, especially with the proliferation of all the animated series and the comics and all the EU stuff that I know jack shit about, you know, off the top of my head, there isn't a flavor you can't do in Star Wars, and it doesn't just fit right in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you're not
so,
wrong.
where if you want to do slapstick comedy in Alien, that's not going to fit very well.
No,
But
it
you could
doesn't.
do it in Star Wars.
You can have beats of slapstick comedy in Alien. You can't have a full slapstick comedy session or campaign.
But look at, be it, we were talking about, Clone Wars or whatever, Rebels, like the all droids episode of was that Rebels? The one where they send the
Clone,
assault team where Chopper and there's
Clone
a little,
Wars.
was that Clone Wars?
Yeah, there was R2 and Commander Gascon, the little snail guy,
Yes.
was driving one of them, and
Yes. Okay, I couldn't remember which series that was. That's pretty much a slapstick episode, but it fits. You
yeah,
know what I mean? So like I think that universe is so vast that's an exceptionally challenging thing to do and be able to get all the things that so many people love about into it. And I think it's a testament to how much Jay and Sam and Sterling and all the people, Keith, whoever, I mean, that's just some of the ones that we know, right? That worked on that
right.
game, how much they love Star Wars and tried to put it into the game. And I think that shows in that game is how much the people behind it genuinely love Star Wars.
The property, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And that's not to throw shade at anyone else for any, licensed games, but the love seems extremely intense in the Star Wars RPG to me.
Yes. Yes. And then they have it split into the three flavors. And at the same time, you have Modifius with Star Trek Adventures, which, granted, I love me some Star Trek, some series more than others, but a lot of the differences in the various series and flavors of Star Trek are superficial, so you're able to hit the beats of, for want of a better term, what makes Star Trek in a single line.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the cover of the second edition core book, and you have Strange New Worlds alongside Enterprise, alongside Next Generation, alongside the original series movie era, all in a group shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And while in one way it looks out of place because you recognize that it's all different eras, sometimes separated by 100 years or more, but they don't seem out of place because, well, it's Starfleet doing Starfleet stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but that's another setting too that is crazy versatile in the stories that you can tell. I mean, just look at this season of Strange New Worlds alone.
See, I
And
am decidedly a non-Trekkie. It's just, I don't know. I've tried a couple times to get into different series, and it just doesn't hook me.
well, they're 5 episodes into the season so far. Episode 1 was part 2 of a season finale premiere, 2-parter. It was basically an alien, as in capital A alien, space combat story. Episode 2 was a wacky farce. Episode 3 was zombies. Episode 4, what was last week? I don't remember what last week. Oh, last week was a meta commentary on Star Trek and entertainment inspiring people. And this week was just outright horror with a dead possessed crewman and weird dimensional things, just plain horror. So 5 episodes, each a completely different tone than the rest.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess in a sense, then it's probably fair to say that the game designers owe it to us to have the tools to make it feel the right way.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, who defines what the right way is? And I think that's something. And I was listening to an old episode of Ken and Robin talk about stuff a week or two ago, and they were talking about, optional rules and putting them in from a game designer perspective. And how do you put in the rule for the thing that people are going to want to do, but boy, you really would rather they didn't? and hearing two designers of that stature kind of talking about that and the challenge it presents from a designer perspective was interesting. I don't remember the name of the episode now and the way they break it up in their huts and all that stuff, but it was kind of I hadn't thought about it from that side. And then now, where do you fall on interconnected subsystems? And by that I mean, like, where, okay, there's this subsystem that everyone finds as a pain in the ass, but if you ignore that, now it affects these 5 other subsystems. I don't know. To me, that's getting into a level of crunch I, as a gamer, don't usually want to deal with.
I wouldn't want to deal with that either. I don't think I've run into that in anything that I play.
Mm-hmm. I know Warhammer 4th Edition is notorious for that.
I think the closest I can think of is the 3 different flavors of Star Wars have their own different subsystem, duty, obligation, and morality, but they're not interconnected with one another, and you can take or leave any one of them regardless of which flavor you're playing. It's not quite necessary, but almost necessary to do morality with Force and Destiny characters, but you can get away with not doing the actual morality system. But pretty much every Star Wars game that I play, I just like, screw duty. Everybody gets obligation.
Well, obligation is a wonderful system, in my opinion, because amongst other things, it is a vehicle for the player to telegraph to the GM what they want this game to be about.
Yeah.
And so, but it's done so cleverly in a way that, like, on the surface, it doesn't look like that at all.
No. Oh, I love obligation. Now, I guess there's potential coming up. I haven't read through them yet, but have you seen the PDFs for the evolved edition of Alien?
No.
So they're tweaking the stress mechanic.
Okay.
And stress and panic will have their own separate things rather than stress and panic being inextricably linked together.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding from other comments that I've seen is they coexist and they're symbiotic, but they are not the same system, one and the same system anymore. There are separate stress and panic tables. So that, under certain situations, if you roll stress, it doesn't necessarily roll on the panic table, but if a panic is triggered, then yes, you would roll on the panic table.
Yeah.
Um, and I've heard people with mixed feelings about that. I know that Free League, after the initial reactions, went back and tweaked them, and I haven't even opened my PDFs since they
Mm-hmm.
tweaked them and uploaded the new versions. So I don't know. So it's entirely possible that those might end up getting tangled a bit, but won't know till we play.
Yeah, well, and look, I've said it before that a lot of these systems, right? There's how they're written, and this is actually something Adam and I don't know if you ever played with Adam at Gamer Nation Con, but I had him on a couple episodes ago, and he said, he finds it funny that it seems like so often, especially like playing at conventions, if you play with the designers of the game, they seem to ignore more of the rules than anyone else.
Oh, sure.
And I posited the thought that that's because, as a designer, they know the feel that the rules were put there to try and generate. But because they know what that feel is, they're going straight for the feel and ignoring the rule that was engineered to
Right.
get it there.
Yeah. A couple of Gamer Nation cons ago, I forget who was running it. Someone was running a Genesis game, and the seats were all full. He had 5 seats available. We were all full, but he had 6 pre-gens just in case. And Sam came up and said, "Do you mind if I play?" It's like, I'm going to tell the developer of this game that you can't play. Of course you can. And at one point, a question about one of the rules came up, and whoever it was running it, I wish I could remember who, starts to look at Sam, and Sam's like, "It's your table. Do whatever you want."
And see, I think that's a spirit of, and I wonder, because you and I are of, I'm guessing, similar age, and we came to tabletop before the mega rise of computer RPGs and so forth. And so I wonder if, like, I don't know how to say it, like, we don't just look at it the same as a lot of people younger than us might. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I've said it before. I like to play tabletop RPGs to do the weird thing.
Hmm.
And
As you know, I can't stand doing the weird thing.
oh no, of course not. Yeah, impersonating missing relatives of Sasquatch over a radio.
For what it's worth, in our D&D proper campaign, we're stealing from the Havoc Brigade game, and we're trying to create a beer elemental.
You know, the one thing that y'all did that really threw me for a loop in that was when y'all decided to have an in-character drinking game. In a game that barely has rules in the first place. It's like, how the heck do I do this?
We are nothing if not challenging.
But it was, look, at least based on the fact, the responses of everyone at the table, everyone had fun, so it was a success. But yeah, like
Yeah,
I don't know.
we've trapped an air elemental somewhere, and I believe it's an air elemental. And Robert and Betsy and I looked at one another and like, we need to make the beer elemental. And Nick is our DM for it, and he's like, "That's not how it works." I was like, "Yeah, Steve says it is."
Nick wasn't there for that, was he?
No, but he had heard about it, and we're like, "You can't stop us. You know that you are powerless to stop us."
Sometimes I feel bad for Nick, just having played with him a little bit and reading his face while he's GMing sometimes is incredibly something.
Yes, there is an expression that we call broken Nick face when you know how occasionally like your phone or your computer will just lock up for a few seconds?
Mhm.
That's broken Nick face. We throw something at him that makes him lock up for a few seconds, and he has to process. He will occasionally take that as an opportunity to go refresh his drink.
And sometimes you have to do that. Like, and that's the thing,
And
not
and
to.
we've really broken him when he walks back into the room cradling the entire bottle of vodka.
Oh, Nick is a great fun though. I like Nick.
Yes, yes, he is. We've made him come back in cradling the bottle 3 or 4 times over the years.
Oh, I know when he played in my Slay Industries game, I think he took more damage from the party than he did from any of the bad things.
That sounds about
Because
right.
his character was melee intensive, and the chances of you getting shot when you're in melee with the thing if other people are shooting it.
Yeah, so my Walking Dead campaign that I run has had about 5 sessions plus a prologue at the end of session 0. So like a session point 5, if you
Hmm.
will. I've killed Nick twice in the campaign already.
Well, there you go.
You're very squishy in Walking Dead.
Well, that's a whole nother topic that we could get on and go on for how long, right?
Right? But yeah, trying to swing us back on onto track. Yeah, if a game gives you the tools to be able to recreate the kind of overall vibe of a property when it's licensed, and yeah, you're gonna have your Star Trek viewer who likes the wacky episodes more than the morality plays. And you're going to have somebody who likes the morality plays more than the war stories. But
Hmm.
Modifius, as an example, has given us a toolbox that lets you bring all of those episodes, if you will, to the table.
Hmm.
And I think another expectation that as a player I have going in is if I'm going into, say, a Star Trek game, I expect there to be a variety of flavors to the episodes because they're not all morality plays or war epics or wacky zany romps.
Hmm.
But you have an episode where you're on a planet that's based itself after 1920s mobs in Chicago, and in the next one you have a very heavy-handed morality play about racism. So that's baked into the IP. That kind of expectation of shifting tones is baked into the IP. So if you're the player that likes the wacky zany adventures more than the morality plays, and you're on a morality play session, okay, I can vibe with this because I know not too long at some point in the near future we're probably going to have a wacky zany romp.
Hmm.
And Star Wars, you have your variety of tones. Alien, you have different genres in similar with similar overtones. So
Yeah.
that's part to me that's part of a selling point of using an IP. And it's like without kicking the hornet's nest of different groups of fans, it's like my saying that I don't like a particular take on Batman is because I don't watch or read a Batman story to see a story about the Punisher. I pick up a Punisher book or watch a Punisher show if I want a Punisher story.
Fair.
So there's a reason why you use a particular IP, and if as the studio developing the game, if you don't take advantage of what that IP has to offer, why bother licensing it?
Yeah.
I'm kind of looking over at my shelf at the Stargate SG-1 core rulebook, which love Stargate. It's a pretty bog standard D20 game with some SG-1 trappings.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think they could have done something, if they had used a unique system, something that could have played up the strengths of the entire Stargate franchise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a tangent that went far longer than I thought it could have, but at the same time, it's entirely in the scope of what we're talking about. So, it is what it is.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts on this general ramble we've been on? Because you know we've been
I
at this
just
for an hour, and I don't know that. Well, I think I said at the beginning, I don't know that we were going to come up with answers.
no, there's no set answers, but just at the end of the day, give me a game that I can have fun in. Give me, I think a good way to boil down what we were saying about the book's layout and readability. Give me the resources that I can easily follow and understand how to use the tools to play this game. And if it's an IP, give me something that lets me feel like I'm in the IP.
Yeah, I think
Those are my expectations.
that seems fair, and I don't think you're off base. Like I said, I think the biggest thing is, yeah, you need to have the foundation to do the thing it says on the cover.
Yeah.
That's an incredibly simple way to wrap up the last hour of us jibber jabbering.
Yeah, but it was so much more fun to.
Well, right. That's the whole point, right?
I, I mean, it'd be a pretty short show if we just said, well, do this. Okay, bye everybody.
All right. So
Tune in next time for the Me and Steve Talk RPGs minute.
we're going to be a YouTube Shorts channel. Oh, all right. So shall we do game of the week?
Let's.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
All right. You going first or am I going first?
Doesn't matter to me. I could go first.
All right. Why don't you go first?
So I went looking back and I don't think anyone has brought this one up. But my game of the week is The End of the World from Edge Studios.
Oh, the oldie but goodie. I know Chris mentioned it when he was on. Actually, I think before we joined the D20 Radio Network, which would have been in single-digit episodes, and this is episode 203. So the statute of limitations is definitely run out.
Well, so it's got 4 books to give you 4 different flavors. There's Alien Invasion, Revolt of the Machines, Wrath of the Gods, and Zombie Apocalypse. But here's its unique little hook.
Mm-hmm.
You make yourself as the PC. So in character creation, all of the players make themselves, and then after you've written down your stats, you go around the table, you read your stats off, and there's only like 6 stats.
Mm-hmm.
You read them off, and the rest of the table up or down votes what you put for that stat.
Mm-hmm.
Like you sold yourself short or you're puffing yourself up a little bit. And if they downvote, then you bump that stat down, but you get to take another advantage and vice versa.
Oh, okay.
And if they upvote it, you bump it up, but you take another disadvantage. And your gear, your starting gear, is what you have on you in session 1 or have easy access to. Like if you were playing at your house, the players would have access to what is in your house if that was the starting setting. And
that's interesting.
And like down to the character creation rules even say the money that you have in your pocket or your wallet right now is the money that your character version has.
Well,
and then each of the 4 books, they're separate flavors, but they have multiple scenario types in them. And basically then as the GM, you run the players through playing themselves in an apocalyptic end of the world scenario. Now, I had the books for years before finally getting a chance to play it for our group. Just this past year, I think it ended up being 3 or 4 sessions,
Mm-hmm.
and we did. I went a step further. I went through each of the 4 books and I picked out a scenario in each of the books. Went to session 0/1, walked everybody through character creation, and then had someone roll a D4, and the D4 determined which flavor we
Oh
played.
wow.
And we ended up playing Wrath of the Gods, and I had picked a Ragnarok scenario that is in there. And
Okay.
so it was the players playing themselves, starting off. We play all of our games pretty much at Nick's house. I was real imaginative. I started it off because they were all there to play an RPG session. In fact, a lot of the artwork in the books for kicking off a session, one of the main pieces of artwork is players sitting around an RPG table, and the only thing that changes about the artwork, I want to say it's the big 2-page spread near the beginning. The only thing that changes about the artwork is what's outside the window behind them, and it has to do with the theme for the book.
That's kind of
So
neat though.
so kicked it off that, they were at Nick's playing an RPG, and the moon disappeared or the sun disappeared because Ragnarok started. And each of the scenarios has a timeline of days for major events for whatever apocalyptic scenario it is.
Mm-hmm.
And each of them also has like a post-apocalyptic version of it. So there's like for Ragnarok, there's one for Ragnarok happens, and there's one for what happens after the events of Ragnarok.
That's cool.
And everybody had a great time. We played around with knowing the areas where knowing Nick's neighborhood and knowing where some of the other players live. One of the other players lives near one of the Texas Instruments facilities. And after they escaped Nick's house because everything was going to hell in his area, like, well, let's just go. Let's break through the gates at TI and hide in the big TI building. And fought a frost giant that was outside the TI building. It is a ton of fun, and we want to do it again at some point. Whether or not I'm going to run it or somebody else is going to run it, so I can actually play myself and die horribly early in the apocalypse, because I know my limitations. But it's just I loved the conceit of playing yourself as a PC,
Mm-hmm.
and that added tweak of letting the rest of the players say like, no, 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 let's adjust these stats a little bit. So you definitely want to play it with a group that knows each other fairly well.
Mm-hmm.
We had one relatively new member of the group, who he'd been in 3 or 4 games before that, who came to Wrath of the Gods. So we were like, we think that's right for you, but maybe this is low and this is high, but we don't know you well enough to say. Whereas, with most of the rest of us, as I'm sure you can imagine, having met us and played with all of us, we were saying, no, no, you're not that good at that. Stop it.
Now that actually,
Yeah.
gosh, now, damn it! I'm trying to not buy more games that I won't get a chance to play, and this sounds entirely too much fun.
And I don't remember the dice mechanic well enough to play it. I kept cheat sheets with me since I hadn't played it, but it's pretty simple dice mechanic where just you roll a number of dice or take dice out of the pool based on pluses and minuses for various conditions and what your stats
Okay.
are.
Well, that's cool. That sounds really cool. And yeah, that was actually Edge before FFG merged into Edge, wasn't it?
Right. Edge developed it and FFG distributed it in the US. It was the reverse of what their normal system was at the time. where
Mhm.
FFG would develop and Edge would distribute in Europe. Edge developed it and FFG distributed.
Okay. All right. Well, End of the World sounds really damn cool. So,
It is.
yeah, anything more to say on that, or is it my turn?
It's your turn. I've rambled about our wackiness.
So, my game of the week this week isn't a game, and it's actually something I have little to no interest in for myself. But it's kind of appropriate that you're here this week, Daryl, because I think you might find this interesting. So, my pick this week is the Fat Dragon Guide to Printing FDM Miniatures. It's a little
Oh.
$2.99, 25-page PDF. I read down through this. This is a thing about printing FDM, and I don't even know what that means.
I can take you down that rabbit hole in a minute if you want.
But what this is from obviously Fat Dragon Games and a guy named Tom Tullis, as I think is how it's pronounced. And down in the reviews, it actually says that pretty much everything that is in these 24 pages is stuff that he has covered and is available for free on his YouTube channel. But the one review, I'll read the review. Most of the knowledge in this guide was shared by the author in a series of videos, and I would recommend watching. I would recommend watching to anyone who wants to print miniatures on FDM printers. I bought the book for two reasons. I feel that printed down parameters and practical examples are really helpful to refresh your memory once you sit at the computer to slice the models, and I wanted to show some support for his continued effort sharing the results of his craft. So this is someone who had already watched all the videos and says, "I'm still glad I bought it." And I feel
I
like
just bookmarked it.
I feel like this is the type of thing that, okay, yeah, that information is out there, but for $3, you could have it as a reference manual. And while I
Yeah.
don't know shit about 3D printing, that's the type of thing I like to have if I'm trying to do something somewhat technical. And I know
Oh, for
there are a lot of
sure.
people in the gaming community who are really into 3D printing. So I don't know. For like I said, $3 seems to me like it might be something that people would find cool.
Oh, absolutely. So since you say you don't know anything about it, the short version of the rabbit hole. FDM is the filament printers, where you get the big spools of the strings of filament.
Okay.
And they're super great for large scale stuff because they generally have larger print beds. And what it does is oversimplifying, it melts the filament and then drops it down and adds up to build your 3D model. Because of the nature of how it works, it is, like I say, great for large scale stuff. It is not as good at small scale detail as resin printing, which resin printing, you take a liquid resin, pour it in a tank, and it's photosensitive. And there's a screen underneath that flashes light in the pattern of each individual layer that hardens the filament as the print bed raises up by millimeter increments.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's a liquid and it's being hardened from a screen display, it's great for small scale detail like miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are people who can get small scale miniature detail out of FDM, and that's why I have bookmarked this. My FDM printer has been dead for like 3 years because it's jammed in such a way that I can't get the filament out of the feed mechanism to unjam it or even to replace the feed mechanism. So I just need a new FDM printer. But my resin printer is going strong.
Fair. I again, like I said, I completely honest. I know nothing about this world, but I did know you were at least fiddling around some with 3D printers. So I figured he'll know if this is something. And based on, again, the reviews on this, that only has 12 ratings, but it's got a full 5-star bar. So the people who are buying it think it's good. And for
For
$3,
sure. Well, and in the times that I was never happy with my FDM printer because I went for instant gratification over quality. I know that FDM printers have improved tremendously since I had that moment of buyer's remorse, and they have better resolution these days. And a big plus to some FDM printers, you have to buy a specific one to do this, as opposed to the resin ones. Since the resin's a liquid, it's all a single color.
Mm-hmm.
But there are newer generations of FDM printers that you can hook up multiple spools of different colored filament, and I haven't messed with them, so I don't know how it does it, but you basically tell it this area is this color, this area is this color, this area is this color. And I have seen some people get results out of it that they say, I did not paint this mini.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks really damn close to a painted mini.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have the multicolor. My next one's going to be multicolor.
Fair. Well, it sounds like you may want this book if no one else does.
Yes, like I said, I have added it to my drive-through RPG wish list.
Well, I'm glad I helped at least one person with Game of the Week this week then.
Yes.
All right then. Well, Daryl, thank you for coming on and at short notice and all kinds of other, so thanks for coming and having a chat with me. Folks, go check out How We Roll and Casual Nerdity. You can find them wherever podcasts are found, as well as I know How We Roll is on YouTube, just like
Casual
we are
Nerdity is now on YouTube too.
Oh, all right. So yeah, everything's everywhere. Go find it. We're in all the places too. So yeah, check us out. Check them out. Check other people on D20 Radio Network out. Any closing words, thoughts, or nonsensical ramblings?
Any more nonsensical ramblings, we'd be here for another hour or two.
All right. Well, being as it's 1:30 in the morning in my time and midnight 30 in your time, I say we sign off and go do our thing and remind everyone out there to be kind to each other and get out there and play some RPGs.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast, on Discord at Me and Steve RPGs, and as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
Oh, your drugs are starting to hit now. You're starting to fall asleep. Good cat.